Reading from The Last Empress by Anchee Min. The beginning. In 1852, a beautiful 17-year-old girl from an important but impoverished family of the Yihonala clan arrived in Peking as a minor concubine to the young emperor Xian Feng. Su Shi, known as Orchid as a girl, was one among hundreds of concubines whose sole purpose was to bear a son to the emperor. It was not a good time to enter the Forbidden City, a vast complex of palaces and gardens run by thousands of eunuchs encircled by a wall in the center of Peking. The Qing dynasty was losing its vitality, and the court had become an insular, xenophobic place. A few decades earlier, China had lost the First Opium War, and it had done little since to strengthen its defenses or improve its diplomatic ties to other nations. Within the walls of the Forbidden City, the consequences of a misstep were often deadly. As one of hundreds of women vying for the attention of the emperor, Orchid discovered that she must take matters into her own hands. After training herself in the art of pleasing a man, she risked everything by bribing her way into the royal bedchamber and seducing the monarch. Xian Feng was a troubled man, but for a time, their love was passionate and genuine. As soon as she had the great fortune to bear him his only son and heir. Elevated to the rank of empress, Orchid still had to struggle to maintain her position as the emperor took new lovers. The right to raise her own child, who was under the control of Empress Nuharu, the emperor's senior wife, was constantly at issue. The invasion by Britain, France, and Russia in 1860 and the subsequent occupation of Peking forced the Chinese court into exile, into distant hunting reserves of Jehol, beyond the Great Wall. There, the humiliating news of the harsh terms for peace contributed to the decline of the emperor's health. With the death of Xian Feng came a palace coup, which Orchid helped to foil with the help of her brother-in-law, Prince Kung, and General Young Lu. The handsome young Lu reignited romantic feelings in the still young Orchid. But in her new position of power, there was little opportunity for a personal life. As co-regent with the Empress Nuharu until her son's maturity, Empress Orchid was at the beginning of a long and tumultuous reign that would last into the next century. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. So I just finished talking through and reading some of Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C. And we've done a couple of Lisa C. books so far. Some we've gotten deeper into than others, but there are so many more authors who write about women's stories out of Asia that I want to explore as well. We will definitely come back to the great Lisa C. And of course, we will come back to the greatest of all time, Amy Tan, at some point. But there's another story that I want to dive into, and that is the story of Empress Orchid, author Anchee Min. Now, this is actually two novels we'll be exploring at the same time. As usual, I'm not going to read the whole thing because copyright exists. But again, I think they're important works that people need to be aware of and read. And obviously, I'm not the only one aware of them because whole published book here. But I do love to celebrate great authors and the work that they do. And every time you read one of these stories, especially historical fiction, it teaches us more about how the world came to be the way it is now. And harkening back to my medieval history course I keep talking about, one of the questions that we were asked at the end of the course was, what was the biggest thing you learned from this class? Or what would you take forward to teach other people? And I answered that I would teach that we need to study history more deeply. We tend to be very surface level with it unless we are, professors of history, like it's your whole job to study. And because of that, we don't truly understand why our world works the way it does today, and if there's a chance for us to make it better. When we were looking through how the medieval world responded to the plague of their time, the bubonic plague, versus how, in modern times we responded to C-19, not much different. You would think that, with advancements in technology and whatnot, that we could have done a better job, but we didn't. Because the truth is, over time, humans have not changed very much. We all primarily desire to keep ourselves and our families safe. We all need and want shelter. We need a way to make a living. We want to eat every day. We need clothing. Like, the basic necessities have always been the same. And when the bubonic plague hit, a lot of what happened in modern times happened in those times. There were those who didn't think it was a threat and went on about their lives. There were those who were more susceptible than others because of their living conditions. There were some who had living conditions that were already pretty sanitary. Like we learned that monasteries were kind of a safe haven at the time because the way the monks shaved their heads prevented the spread of the lice that carried a lot of the bubonic plague from rats to humans. So yeah, just all of that. And then there were, wealthy families who were like, we're just going to shut ourselves off from the world and not participate. And yet the plague still found its way in because fleas don't care how much money you have. Rats don't care how rich you were. And even the best circumstances in medieval times were still horrific compared to a modern Western standard of sanitation and whatnot. So it's really interesting to cross compare what's happened, but these are not the only plagues that have happened. If you look at other ones that have happened at different parts of society, there are variations in the response based on the customs of a particular culture, but overall, none of us did it right. So that's why books like this are so important, to go back and see, how did we get here? Because what I learned in medieval history leading up to modern history was that we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. And if we don't endeavor to study history truthfully and to understand from all perspectives, what is the truth of what happened? Why did this thing happen? And can we do better? If we don't really take that seriously, well then, guess what? The next generation is going to repeat the cycle, and the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that, and humans will neither grow nor change, even though our technology we have around us might change, or the comforts that we enjoy might change. The core of who we are doesn't. And if we don't take history seriously, we are forever doomed to repeat the cycles that cause strife, that cause division, that cause people to go hungry and be poor in a world that has more than enough resources for everyone. But I digress. These two books, Empress Orchid by Anchee Min, and then The Last Empress by Anchee Min, follow the life of Empress Orchid. You may know the character that this is based on by another name, Empress Ji. So these two novels are about the same person, how she came to be in the palace and be one of the emperor's wives, concubines, eventually an empress, and then what happened through the end of her reign. I've got both of them out because we're going to jump in between over the next few readings in these books. But they're both very important. That opening I read was actually from The Last Empress. So it is basically the prologue to the book, telling us what happened briefly in this one, and then what's about to happen here. And we want to look at both sides of Empress Orchid's story of how she came to be in the palace. The system of monarchy that is in Asia, and I would say Russia as well. Does Russia count as part of Asia? I think it does. I don't know. I'm like, is Russia Europe or Asia? I feel like it should be Asia. Yeah. Anyhow, but the system of monarchy in Russia, China, Japan, very different from the systems of monarchy that existed in Europe. Africa and South America are their own things as well, but we're not talking about them today. We're comparing these two because these are the nations that are in conflict, specifically Britain and China, as we go through this period. Because we're getting to the end of there being Chinese dynastic rule in China in these novels. So if you didn't know, prior to China as it is today, they were ruled by family dynasties, emperors and empresses. The royal household was set up to be under Confucian rule. The Confucian theologies, philosophies, that the emperor and his household should be a model for the rest of the country. The emperor who controlled everything behind the gates of his palaces, not just his servants and warriors and advisors, but also his women. Everyone else should be able to do the same. And with what the heavens grant you, you are supposed to do well with. If you are doing things correctly, your women will be well behaved, even if you have 100 of them. And they will live in harmony somehow, magically. All those women are just going to get along together. They should be in harmony. You should have many sons and daughters. Sons first, of course. Your subjects will be loyal to you, and that reflection of filial harmony should pervade all of life in China. And so all other families should strive to be like the royal family. What's really funny about that is, the more you read about the royal harem and all of that, like it doesn't work. It's such a bad idea to have all those women living together. But the whole point was to produce heirs for the emperor. That was the whole reason. The more women he had, the more opportunities there were to produce offspring. On a practical level, I get it. But yeah, it never worked. And what's interesting is when you read smaller stories about families that had similar setups. So we just looked at Lady Tan's Circle of Women by Lisa C. That central character, Yu Jian, who eventually grows up to be a doctor, she marries into a family where all of the sons in the family have multiple wives. Her husband will eventually take, several other wives that she basically gives him at some point. But there's no harmony amongst any of those people who are all sharing the same man. There is no harmony. There is the appearance of harmony, and that's what Confucianism does. It gives everyone their rules for how they're supposed to show up in society. Everybody went, okay, we'll do this. That's the short version. And so everyone behaves a certain way in their family. Daughters-in-law who marry into a new family know what's expected of them. Sons who are firstborn know what's expected of them. The pressure of the family success is on that son. He has to do well. If you are the last daughter, you are the lowest on the totem pole, and very few people care about you, if any, because of your station. But everyone knows who they are, what's expected of them, and what they need to do to make the household successful. And if every household is functioning in a way that is for the success of the house, ultimately the success of the kingdom, which is the success of China. And that is that group thinking that is very foreign to Western cultures. There are things that can be accomplished in some Asian nations that you can't even try to do in Western countries, because Western countries are very individualistic for the most part. And I say we because I'm American, we are raised to do our best, to live your best life now. Heavy sarcasm. We're raised to seek what does the best for ourselves, and if we have something left over, then we help people out. That's a blanket statement. Obviously there are outliers and exceptions in every culture, but it's very different to a culture that is focused on, I've been born into a place in society and I need to fulfill the role that society expects of me. That's not what we think here. In America, we think, I'm gonna make myself a place in society. In Confucian China, you're already given a place in society and you need to do what's expected of you. Here's why all of that matters. The face to the nation and to other countries was of this grand, harmonious court. All of these families with these multiple layers and branches working so beautifully together. And it wasn't. It was not working. When you read through any novel that talks about the harems, especially, and not just the imperial harem, but, you know, if a man had several wives and concubines, even if they put on a face of everything's okay, yes, I'm the perfect wife, on the inside, everybody is seething. Everybody's ready to rip everyone else's hair out. And the women are taught to just swallow their feelings. It doesn't matter if you feel jealousy. It doesn't matter if you're upset. It doesn't matter if you're hurt. What matters is harmony. And they're trained from basically when they can understand language. This is how you behave. This is how you behave. Behave this way. Repeat back to me. How do you behave? What are you supposed to do? Behave correctly. Behave. Nothing about feeling correctly. Nothing about doing what's right. You do what's expected. There's a scene in Lady Tan's Circle of Women, and please read it, and you'll know it when you get to it. It's about a quarter to the end of the book, and something happens. I'm not going to spoil it, but something happens, and a woman gets severely punished for something that is very much outside of her control. And when I say outside of her control, I mean and this woman is actually putting her own self in danger to help another woman who is senior ranked to her. And because she fell in unfortunate circumstances, she was punished for her unfortunate circumstances being inconvenient to others. That's the society that we're talking about. And when you read it, you'll know it. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to read that particular scene on my channel because it's just too, you have to experience it. Maybe in 3 years when the book's been out for a while and everyone's had a chance for shock and awe. But it is, I'm gonna give you, it's hard. That I had to put the book down several times while I was reading those pages. But we're in a society where what you want and need as an individual means nothing. It's all about putting forward the facade that things are working well. When you're in a society where people can be punished for being inconvenient, it's not working. It's not working. But they want to present that it's working. And that was probably the beginning of the end of the Chinese dynasties. Now, as somebody who loves, things on a grand scale, I love a palace. I love pomp and circumstance with the best of them. But the truth is that pomp and circumstance comes at a price. It comes at a price, and it's usually at the price of the people and those who serve the court. Like in these dynasties, in these palaces, the only men who could serve in the palaces behind the guards were those who were eunuchs. You know how they got eunuchs? Look it up. Go ruin your day. Yeah. So if everything's working right, then you wouldn't have to make the males who were serving eunuchs to guarantee that all heirs were of the emperor's bloodline. Because the truth is, when you have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 women for one man and expect these women just to be happy with nothing. Granted, they live in the palace, but let's be real. They are birds in cages. They're beautiful. They're well fed. They're taken care of. And to an extent, their families are taken care of as they rise in the ranks of the harem. Their families get more rewards. But these women don't leave the palace. That would be like if you or I, whatever house we had. So you see my office here. It's great in here. I love it. I mean, all my nerdity is on full display. I love everything about it. But if this was the extent of my world, this can't be it. And that's why things in the palace weren't working. They bring all of these young women in, and choose those who would be worthy of producing an heir, or the emperor takes a fancy to someone, because truth be told, the emperor can have any woman in the kingdom that he wants. You're not supposed to take another man's wife, can he? It's the emperor. Of course he can. Looking at you, King David. Anywho, with them having that ability, there's no way he's going to see every single one of them. There's only so much embroidery you can do, so many poems you can recite, and paintings you can paint before you start finding ways to entertain yourself. And the way the harem entertained itself was by screwing with one another. And I don't mean that in a biblical sense. They would mess up each other's lives. If they saw that one concubine was getting more favor than others, well, let's mess up her life. If they saw that one was, getting favors for their family that they weren't able to get, well, let's mess up her life. One of them is pregnant. Well, let's figure out how to make this pregnancy non-existent. Can we trip her down some stairs? Like, it was brutal. It was ruthless, because all of them had the goal of producing a son for the emperor. But here's the kicker, and we talked about this when we were looking at Ru Yi's Love in the Palace, which of course we'll revisit that again when I figure out how not to get a copyright strike for having videos. But we saw that in Ru Yi's Royal Love in the Palace. Even if they have a son, the first son is not necessarily going to be the emperor. If you have 1,000 women and you're having relations with multiple of them at the same time, chances are you can have babies at the same time. What if you have 2 sons born on the same day at the same time? When you got that many women pregnant at once, it's gonna happen. The emperor picks out of his sons who is going to be the heir. He watches them grow and looks for the most clever, the strongest, the wisest of them. But that's also going to follow the personality of that particular emperor as well. If that particular emperor wasn't given to being wise and charitable and the rest of it, that might not be the quality he's looking for. Or if he suspected he has a son who wants to usurp the throne from him before it's his time, that son might get picked off or sent into exile. It was ruthless. And then on top of that, who has the son makes a difference as well. So we heard that this particular woman we're following, Empress Orchid does bear this particular emperor his only son. So that is the guaranteed heir. However, remember from Lady Tan's Circle of Women, the first wife gets the honor of being the mother to whatever son is born. So the first wife of the emperor, who is the legitimate empress, she takes that son to raise as her own, and Orchid can't raise her own kid. And she's always in a tug of war over how she wants her child raised, because eventually she could have influence through her son, depending on how things play out. And then the protection of her family and everything is going to rest on her having produced the only male heir. That was a lot. There's so much to explore, but because things are so broken behind the palace walls, and they're putting forth a facade of everything working well, that's just decay from the inside. Have you ever seen something that looked like it was perfect on the outside, and then you touched it and it just kind of crumpled away? That can happen with things that are left out in the sun for a couple of seasons. If you put pillows outside that aren't made for the outdoors, they might look nice, but then you go and sit on the thing and it borderline disintegrates. The fabric it looks nice, but weather has beaten it down. The outside circumstances, the inside circumstances. It can have mold growing on the inside. You have no idea that all of that is in there. That's what's happening in China at this period. Everything looks good on the outside, but on the inside, there's a lot going on, because every woman in that palace, and this is what is so, I don't know how this was missed for so many thousands of years, but every woman in that palace is connected to a family. And even though, daughters aren't important, blah, 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 they are important, because if their daughter is picked by the emperor and eventually produces a child, male or female, that's good for the whole family. If she produces a boy, even better. So those girls gain their importance by being concubines, or eventually even an empress, to the emperor. And if the emperor doesn't treat their daughter well, and a family is important enough and has enough sway, they can actually influence government politics. One of them is going to be the one that let the British in. Yeah, I said it. I heard you were mistreating my child. What do you mean I can't see my grandson? What do you mean my daughter's been cast into the cold palace for all eternity? You know what? Opium wars. It wasn't that simple, but kind of was. The complexity of the Chinese court is mind-boggling. What's going on in the Forbidden City, there has never been another court like that. You know, if you want to get an idea of the scale of life in the Forbidden City and what the emperor has under his control, there's a few movies that do a good job of showing just how expansive that is. Jet Li's Fearless is a good one. That's a good one that has a decent representation. It's artistic, of course, but that one does a good one. And then there is a Gong Li movie. I think Gong Li and Chow Yun Fat and that other guy whose name I can never remember all star in another one. What is it called? Curse of the Golden Flower. Curse of the Golden Flower is a good one to show how the courts operated and just the scale of bodies to make China function. Because all of those courtiers, all those advisors represented different regions and so on and so forth. It's so much, but there was also so much corruption on the inside. Every government's corrupt. All of them, every single one. Yours isn't special. But when you're in control of hundreds of millions of people in a portion of history where most nations were not that big, you know, just the bodies that were available, that's just more opportunities for things to seep in. That's why when they make stuff that goes outside, it tends to be solid pieces. That way, water, sun, moisture can't get on the inside and rot it from the inside out. Having that grandeur of the imperial court, those were all just pores for something to seep in. Because you can't guarantee that every human in there was going to do exactly as the emperor willed. They were going to do exactly what was in the best interest of China. Because everyone in there has a family they're connected to. Everyone in that palace has their own goals that they want to achieve. Even though Confucian society dictates that you are supposed to live for your kingdom and not the other way around. If things didn't go completely in the way that some folks thought they should, no one, not even in Confucian China, was above a little subterfuge, a little counterintelligence to get their way. But all of that is brewing under this beautiful facade of the royal family. And eventually that facade cracks and the British do take over. Interesting to read the history of how that happened. And then eventually the British are ousted and the regime we have today in China existed. This is really interesting because these stories are focusing basically on the end of the Chinese dynasties and how it happened. And our central character, Orchid, who is based on Empress Shiji, is a fascinating character. Now, I would highly recommend going and doing some reading about Shiji. We'll talk some more about her as we dig deeper into the books. But I think she was one of only a couple of women who were actually noted not as empress, but as emperor. Because emperor is a male title. Like, emperor means the actual ruler. Empress is still under the emperor. Emperor is over everybody. And she was able to basically be emperor through her son at the end of the Qing dynasty. There was another woman whose name I cannot remember a couple of thousand years ago who also was an emperor and managed to take over, which that unheard of. And women rulers were not a thing. But unfortunately, from what I've read, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that Shiji has basically been wiped from the history in China. Like where she was buried, her name has been chiseled off that grave, like she never existed. There were other things that happened that as time went by, they decided, you know what, we're just going to pretend she was never here, never happened. And to have had such a life and legacy and just to have it wiped away, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. So let's start at the beginning. A very good place to start. Empress Orchid by Anchee Min. Prelude. The truth is that I have never been the mastermind of anything. I laugh when I hear people say that it was my desire to rule China from an early age. My life was shaped by forces at work before I was born. The dynasty's conspiracies were old, and men and women who were caught up in the cutthroat rivalries long before I entered the Forbidden City and became a concubine. My dynasty, the Qing, has been beyond saving ever since we lost the Opium Wars to the Great Britain and its allies. My world has been an exacerbating place of ritual where the only privacy has been inside my head. Not a day has gone by when I haven't felt like a mouse escaping one more trap. For half a century, I participated in the elaborate etiquette of the court and in all its meticulous detail. I am like a painting from the Imperial Portrait Gallery. When I sit on the throne, my appearance is gracious, pleasant, and placid. In front of me is a gauze curtain, a translucent screen symbolically separating the male from the female. Guarding myself from criticism, I listen but speak little. Thoroughly schooled in the sensitivity of men, I understand that a simple look of cunning would disturb the counselors and ministers. To them, the idea of a woman as the monarch is frightening. Jealous princes prey on ancient fears of women meddling in politics. When my husband died, I became the acting regent for our 5-year-old son, Tong Chi. I satisfied the court by emphasizing in my decree that it was Tong Chi, the young emperor, who would remain ruler, not his mother. While the men at court sought to impress each other with their intelligence, I hid mine. My business of running the court has been a constant fight with ambitious advisors, devious ministers, and generals who command armies that never saw battle. It has been more than 46 years. Last summer, I realized that I had become a candle burnt to its end in a windowless hall. My health was leaving me, and I understood that my days were numbered. Recently, I have been forcing myself to rise at dawn and attend the audience before breakfast. My condition I have kept a secret. Today I was too weak to rise. My eunuch came to hurry me. The mandarins and autocrats are waiting for me in the audience hall on sore knees. They are not here to discuss matters of state after my death, but to press me into naming one of their sons as heir. It pains me to admit that our dynasty has exhausted its essence. In times like this, I can do nothing right. I have been forced to witness the collapse of not only my son at the age of 19, but of China itself. Could anything be crueler? Fully aware of the reasons that contributed to my situation, I feel stifled and on the verge of suffocation. China has become a world poisoned with its own waste. My spirits are so withered that the priests from the finest temples are unable to revive them. This is not the worst part. The worst part is that my fellow countrymen continue to show their faith in me, and that I, at the call of my conscience, must destroy their faith. I have been tearing hearts for the past few months. I tear them with my farewell decrees. I tear them by telling my countrymen the truth that their lives will be better off without me. I told my ministers I am ready to enter eternity in peace regardless of the world's opinions. In other words, I am a dead bird, no longer afraid of boiling water. I had been blind when my sight was perfect. This morning, I had trouble seeing what I was writing, but my mind's eye was clear. The French dye does an excellent job of making my hair look the way it used to. Black as velvet night. And it does not stain my scalp like the Chinese dye I applied for years. Don't talk to me about how smart we are compared to the barbarians. It is true that our ancestors invented paper, the printing press, the compass, and explosives. But our ancestors also refused, dynasty after dynasty, to build proper defenses for the country. They believed that China was too civilized for anyone to even think about challenging. Look at where we are now. The dynasty is like a fallen elephant taking its time to finish its last breath. Confucianism has been shown to be flawed. China has been defeated. I have received no respect, no fairness, no support from the rest of the world. Our neighboring allies watch us falling apart with apathy and helplessness. What is freedom when there has been no honor? The insult for me is not about this unbearable way of dying, but about the absence of honor and our inability to see the truth. It surprises me that no one realizes that our attitude toward the end is comical in its absurdity. During the last audience, I couldn't help but yell, "I am the only one who knows that my hair is white and thin." The court refused to hear me. My ministers saw the French dye and my finely arranged hairstyle as real. Knocking their heads on the ground, they sang, "Heaven's grace, 10,000 years of health. Long live your majesty." These are going to be really great to explore. I hope you enjoyed that introduction, and we're going to keep going. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.